Hi, you've just tuned into the Creative Podcast, the place where creatives go for inspiration. My name is Jessica, and I'm a creative coach and host of the podcast. Joining me today is Dr. Gibbons, co-host and an extraordinary career coach. So, Dr. Gibbons, who are we debriefing today?
Well, we were just fortunate enough to have James Verderamo with us, who has a nearly 20-year career in theater with both singing and dancing. And fortunate enough that recently his work has been local to us with Omaha, having returned to the area, and some really great gems that we picked up from him. If you haven't viewed that or listened to that, please feel free to go back and take a listen to that. Then you'll have a little bit greater reference to what we're talking about. But yeah, let's dive in. Some great stuff.
Absolutely, let's do that. So James Verderamo, he is an actor, a singer. He even had some stage combat on his resume. And he was just really wonderful to get to talk to. So I shared in the episode that we were interviewing with him that I'd actually seen him on stage. So I saw him in a role in Hello Dolly that was put on by the Omaha Community Playhouse, as well as a lead role that he was in for Jersey Boys, which was also put on by the Omaha Community Playhouse. Mm-hmm. So it's just so wonderful to see someone that you actually have seen on stage, and you've seen them move and sing and act, and you're like, wow. Mm-hmm. And then you get to see them in person, which they say sometimes you should be afraid, to meet the people that you actually like on stage in person.
Yeah.
But I found him to be delightful. Yeah. He was very relaxed. He gave us some great nuggets of information. And I do believe that our viewers at home, online, if you're on Spotify, wherever you are, you're listening, you're watching, that you're going to love that episode. So let's start debriefing.
Yes.
And the first thing that I want to talk to you about is in the beginning of the interview, we talked a lot about some of his background and his career. So he actually exited the military after a 10-year career, and he came into theater as a full-time professional. So some of our creatives at home, they may say, well, my career is in IT, my career is in education, my career is in business sales, like my career is not fully consecutive of art, of drawing, of painting, of sculpting, of whatever your creative medium is. And so I thought it was refreshing to see someone who was in a professional career, built their resume within their professional choice, and then they were able to transition over into being a full-time professional actor. So what do you think, or what kind of advice can you give creatives that have a 9-to-5 but still want to be creative? What inspiration can we give them?
I think that's a great detail that you pulled out there, because if you think about the creatives and those doing it for a living, how many of them actually started doing it for a living? We hear about tons of actors and actresses who were waiters and waitresses. There's a variety of things out there, and I think something that's particularly exciting for creatives is that, let's say you are an IT person, 9-to-5, or an accountant, 9-to-5, something like that, knowing that you have this creative outlet, you have this entire other element of you that you get to explore, that someone else isn't the director of, someone else isn't the boss of. You are the boss of your art, and you have the opportunity to develop that and to dive as deeply as you want. Now, as far as moving that, if there's wanting to move that to full time, we could do a few more episodes on that alone. But even if it's not something that you want to pursue full time, still feed that, feed that part a little personal thing. I played piano for years and years, and performance ready, but never would let myself just kind of sit and just goof around on the piano. And I allowed that to freeze me up because I couldn't just sit down and play with people around. I wasn't performance ready. It wasn't how I was trained. And when I would sit down and play, I realized how much I missed it and how much it fed me. And if your creative outlet is just that, an outlet, it's yours. And own it and take it wherever you want it. But if you do want to take that full time, allow your 9 to 5 to feed the bank account, get things prepared, saving up for whatever preparation you might need. I know that James, he had referenced, coaching with, acting and dancing and such, or whether it's workshops. Do what you need to do with your 9 to 5 to prepare for what you will need to give you longevity in pursuing your creative spirit.
Absolutely. So for our creatives back at home, I do want to parse out what you said. So there's really two different avenues that you're speaking of. One is I'm continuing with my career, wherever that career is, and I'm going to supplement my life, fill my life with creative outlets, either to fill myself, and I can do that through education. I can do that through, you said performance ready, it's something that maybe I'm performing for myself or for others. I do want to also add volunteering, advocacy. There's so many ways that you can fill that creative cup. So for the first train, it is I'm working full-time or part-time, whatever that may look like for you in your life, in the phase of your life, and it's supplementing with art. And then you started to segue into a different train or railroad track. And that is, I want to transition my career. So transitioning one's career takes a lot of strategy and a lot of time. And as you mentioned, we can go into that quite a few episodes, especially if you want to do coaching and if you're ready to get into a career change. I've done a career field change. Dr. Gibbons has done a career field change. So we're very familiar with that. And within my own career change, it took me 2 years because I had to relearn, upskill. And then I believe James Verderamo also highlighted some items as well with your education, who's training and getting yourself out there and building your resume, your stage credits. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I kind of don't like my 9 to 5, or maybe you're working overnights and you're saying there's so much more for me in my life. What I would say is start experimenting in a controlled manner, meaning don't just drop everything and oh, who cares about the bills? But be strategic. Find a mentor, get a coach, take a class, a workshop, meet people that have the same passion as you and ask them what they're doing, connect with them. So I really do want to highlight that to our listeners, that there are two paths here that we're talking about.
Correct.
When it comes to filling your cup creatively. And so as we're talking about filling our cups creatively, in your background, in your education, we also stumbled upon this whole thing of community, which is so funny because we've had a couple other interviews in which this has come out, like who's your tribe, who's your huddle, who's your community, who's your support network. So here we have an actor with the same advice. What is it about this? What makes community so important that people who don't even know each other, completely different careers and artistic mediums, are saying the exact same thing? Talk to me, Dr. Gibbons.
I think that there's so much to be said for an understanding of shared experience. If we were talking about auditions with James, and every single person that he has worked with has experienced that. They have experienced rejection. They have experienced the nerves. They've experienced, maybe freezing on stage. everyone has experienced something in one way or another, and everyone has adapted in one way or another. And not everything that we do that works for us did we just come up with on our own. It's the collective intelligence. When we have more minds to learn from, we just pluck and choose what feeds us and what works for us. And so when you have that tribe, those people, it's one thing to, speak with, your college roommate about something, but if your college roommate was a math major and doesn't know the first thing about acting, they might be limited in the level of empathy or understanding, or even suggestions, advice, because they've not been there. And no fault to the mathematician. It's just what you know. And there's, especially when you have the rejection, not that misery loves company, but you love knowing you're not the only one. And which I think he framed very well, that the rejection isn't really a rejection. It's the director has a vision of what this role is. Maybe you're dynamite, but you're not the vision, and that's okay. So a lot of ways to frame, rejection, but yeah, that team, that tribe, that support group, it keeps coming up with our creatives. There's another word that keeps coming up with them too.
Yes. And vulnerability, mutual respect. So those are two other questions I'm going to ask you. We're going to definitely dig into that, because when you started talking about it, it was like, oh, there goes the V word. Here it comes. And the mutual respect, that was interesting. I loved, you just briefly touched on that when we're talking about the community, about mutual respect and how rejection isn't truly rejection. So before we end talking about community, because there were so many gems in that episode. So once again, if you haven't seen it, you need to go back and rewatch it. We're everywhere on streaming platforms, so please watch that. So let's talk one more time about community. Let's talk strategy when it comes to community. So we learned strategy in a different way. And I think something that he gave us as a tip that could possibly be for our user or listeners is that he said your community is actually already there. And you just highlighted that too. So I'm going to draw it out, make it very plain, that if you are auditioning, if you're on a stage play, which you may be auditioning, and then you're actually practicing rehearsals, and then you actually have the show. So the show may run for a month or two, depending if you're on a traveling cast or if you're locally based. So you also have your months of rehearsal. You are building a community. You are building a professional network. And so if you're wondering, like, how do I start? How do I build this community? This is the first act I've been on, the first, This is the first production that I've been on. Well, guess what? Get those contacts that are on that theatrical production. If you're saying, oh, this is my first art show that I've done, get the contacts of the people that are also displaying their art with you. Because like you said, that there's this mutual empathy. And it's not about misery-loving company. I think it's about perspective. We have a shared perspective. We have a shared experience. So definitely want to give that tidbit to our readers, our listeners, however you're ingesting this information, because that matters. Now let's get over to...
Can I add one
go
more
ahead.
thing?
Go ahead.
Let's say you are a viewer, listener, and you say, but I haven't had my break yet. I have yet to get a role. Let's say, for example, it's a local community theater. Take a look at the previous show. What was the previous production? If some of the artists are still local, reach out to them, whether it's, Instagram, whatever social media channel, or if you have a mutual connection, ask them, can I have an hour coffee with you? I'd like to bounce some ideas off of you. I'd like to welcome your thoughts on a few things. You might be very pleasantly surprised how many people are open to supporting and helping someone. It doesn't matter if you don't know them. The fact that you're honoring their expertise and their experience, and they know that they can give. They don't have the answer to everything, but once again, even once you do have that tribe, it's from someone's own experience, their perspective of that. So if you have yet to have a cast, reach out to others, and they can also link you with additional people.
So I have a personal story that I'm going to share
Tell
with you about reaching out to people who have previously been on a show.
Okay.
So this is while I was living in South Korea, and I auditioned for a show called Jungkook Norecharam. It is a national singing program. It is a long-standing program. So sometimes when I tell people, like, yeah, I've been on the show, I had the Inki-sang award, but it is a very competitive show, and it's part of the culture. And I actually knew of someone. I was telling my coworkers, like, hey, I want to perform for this show. I want to try out, and I want to sing the song in Korean. I'm going to dance. I'm going to perform. I'm going to do the whole thing. And a woman told me, she's like, I don't think you're going to be able to make it. But I do know someone who has made it before. Let's talk to him and let's see what you need to do to make it. So when you said, oh, I haven't had my big break yet, maybe because you haven't connected with the right person. And so I ended up connecting with him. He gave me the full rundown because it's a whole strategy, and like the practice, and I ended up combining my act with somebody else's. And so we all did the show together. But if it wasn't for his mentorship, I would have never made it to the show because, one, it was not for foreigners. It wasn't a foreigner-focused episode. It was for people who speak Korean or Hangul, and they're singing and they're performing, and I'm competing against like really good singers and dancers. But it was his mentorship that made the difference, that made me get on that show, that really helped me go through the audition. He taught me, he prepped me. So once again, community. It's not that I need to be established. Let's go back to what James said, vulnerability. And we're going to transition over to that. He talked about vulnerability of learning new skills and new traits and dancing and just the different instruments. So I think that vulnerability says a lot when you're in a field and when you're growing and you're expanding your network, you're expanding your community, being vulnerable with what you don't know and what you need help with. So with that, let's talk about vulnerability and what you think about it.
What really struck me with James was speaking about vulnerability, but then also when he was shared about how it could be, intimidating, and when you're part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I had started to ask about when you are a lead role, then you are also a leader among the cast, and that having that vulnerability while also being a leader requires humility as well, and that can be very challenging. Not trying to say that there's a bad rap or anything. Perhaps there have been an ego or two somewhere along the line in acting that maybe we've heard about, or performance of some level. But to be part of a cast and to be the leader of that cast, I think that vulnerability and that humility is what makes the rest of the cast want to follow your lead, because they see your humanity and they see that you wanting to make the intentional connection to be part of, like James said, that part of something that's bigger than yourself. This is bigger than my ego as the lead. And sometimes people can live to have that ego moment, like, oh, I finally made it. I finally got the lead. I finally get to have the ego. If that's what you're after, to each their own. But what a rich experience when you have that connection, when you're able to lead in such a capacity. And it almost makes me think of servant leadership.
I was going to say authentic leadership, but yes, servant leadership matters too. I think they
Yeah.
both would fit
Yeah.
well. Absolutely.
And I think as a leader of creatives, to have that, I mean, authenticity and vulnerability, they're just so closely connected. To be able to stand in your authentic self is to be vulnerable, to not feel that you need to portray a particular role or, be a specific way. There's just so many ways that it impacts, whether it's from just growth as an individual, just, growth as a creative, or growth as a leader among other creatives. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you're talking about leadership, but these are actors. And so that begs the question of, what does it take to be a good actor, or what does it take to be a good creative? And I think that we talk a lot about the skills and the natural abilities. Those are the things that really get highlighted, like, oh, look at the beautiful pictures this person can take. Look at the amazing songs this person can make. But sometimes I think we brush past the soft skills. I think we brush past the value set, because James leads from the value of respect. He talked a lot about it, mutual respect. And you could see in everything that he did, even in his communications before the show, you could see a high value of respect. And so let's talk about soft skills, because you're talking about vulnerability and authenticity, and it leads into this triangle of leadership and who you are and his ability to actually lead a cast. And so if you are to lead, what are some of the skills that a leader needs to be effective in these spaces? Let's just talk about a couple of them.
I think something that plays a huge role is the ability to have empathy. And so from a leader perspective, you have most likely, if you're the leading role, chances are good this isn't your first time acting. And so remembering what that was like, remembering when you wanted this big role and you were selected for the ensemble, or you wanted to play this role and you're creating set and design. I admire all of those roles. I do. So having an understanding, remembering what that was like, and maybe it was just the month before, that you were in those shoes. So I think maintaining that humility, right? But I also think with empathy, let's say if you're preparing for a role and thinking, I'm not quite sure how to convey this. Really having an empathy of looking at the character as a person that you know, and how would that person react to this, or how would they feel about this, and understanding that character as an actual person, and feeling what they feel, and kind of processing what they may be processing at that time. And so I think empathy can play a large role in what happens with leadership and with diving into one's character.
Absolutely. I'm just going to do a couple highlights for our listeners. One, you talked about empathy. And so empathy is different than sympathy. So I do want to make sure that they have a delineation. Sympathy is like, oh, I feel sorry for you. I think Brene Brown says this the best, actually. And empathy is actually coming down, being with you face to face. I'm feeling this with you. I'm going through it with you. And she has a lot of vulnerability research and about empathy. So she definitely says it better than I do. But just to have a quick definition, sympathy is different than empathy. It's really, like you said, understanding, looking at the character modeling, saying, well, how would they respond to this? How would they respond to this demand? How would they respond to this question or this feedback? And would this build them? Would this tear them down? So really leaning into empathy. And I think the whole interview, by the way, was phenomenal. And I think you helped ask some really good questions. And just on this debrief today, just going through it, we didn't get through everything because there truly was so much. And I hope that, hey, if you're watching and you say, can you talk about this topic? Drop a comment, reach out to us, send us an email, drop a comment on our blog post. And we would love to talk more about this. I know I just love picking your brain because I have the privilege of having you here, but know that at home you have the privilege also of having us virtually and reaching out to us. So I wanted to say thank you so much for being open to your thoughts and opening up this time and this space between us to talk about this interview and the information that we learned from there. And if you're at home and this was valuable to you, which I hope it was, like us, share, comment, subscribe, give us your comments. We love all the feedback. And if you're working on a creative project, please reach out to Dr. Gibbons or myself. We would love to partner with you and to hear where you are in your creative projects. And so with that, Dr. Gibbons, I'm going to let you close us out.
I sure will. And Jessica, I have to tell you, I appreciate so deeply. You just get right down into the juicy details. You know how to pluck everything out. And I think, oh, good call, good call. Yeah. And also, I'm going to need some more details on this show in South Korea.
I'll show you the video. I have it all recorded. Maybe, I was on there twice. So
maybe
I will show you the video.
I don't know. Requests, we can play that on a time lighting out of the show. I would love that. Let's do it.
Yeah.
If we get this many followers, we'll
oh my goodness.
Well, thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Thank you for joining the Creative Life Podcast, where creatives go for inspiration.